This is the Checkmate versus the International Master, Max game.
If you're going to play the two knights Caro-Kann, the Caro-Kann two knights variation, you better study the endgame positions, especially the rook and pawn endgames. Knight c3 was played in the game. Remembering that opening, it's a race for tempo and development. e5, pawn to e5, stops the knight from developing to f6. So after c5, c3, at some point you're going to play d4. Okay, d4 is played here, and after the trade, develop the other knight. Bishop to e2, but first h3, bishop h5, bishop e2, and you're going to castle. The idea now is that since d2 already has a piece on it, such as the queen, then what you want to do is develop the bishop to the b2 square. So you're going to fianchetto the queen's bishop and play b3. And you want to do this because it puts that protection on d4. After there, bishop to b2, you're able to hold the d4 pawn, which bolsters the pawn on e5. And the good thing about white's position is that white does have the two bishop advantage. And either rook can swing over to the open file. And all the pawns are protected except for h3. But other than that, white is better here. In the game, knight c3 was played, and d takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop g4, h3, bishop h5, followed by knight to g3 and bishop to g6. Now, bishop to c4 aims for the pawn on f7. The idea is good, but another good move is pawn to h4, threatening to push the pawn to e5. And after h6, then knight e5 attacks the bishop. Now black does have an answer for it by playing the queen to d6, which also protects the bishop on g6. And after knight d7, just capture, and white can continue development easily, develop the bishop and castle, and the next task is to connect the rooks. Okay, so it's a matter of technique. You can play h4, threatening the pawn to h5, or play bishop to c4. And I think both moves are good. You have both knights developed on the king's side. Now after bishop c4, e6, d4, knight to d7, pawn to c3, knight f6, from g to f6. White castles, bishop d6, bishop d3, the trade on d3, and queen c7. So, trade of a set of minor pieces in the center. Knight f6, queen h4, bishop e7. Another interesting move here is the bishop to g5. But let's look at either bishop to f4 or rook to e1. Queen G3 was played in the game, and a trade on G3. In knight E4, G4, black castles, bishop to F4, knight D6, and white captured on D6, recapture, knight to E5, bishop takes E5, D E5, rook F to D8, rook on A to D1, rook D5, and in the game, white captured on D5. The move to play here is the pawn to C4. Look at the position. It's a rook and pawn endgame. So playing this, white gets the 7th rank. Both rooks are attacking the pawn on F7. But after the advance, if white takes, then the E6 pawn is no longer backward, but is now connected with the pawns on G7 and H7. And white, on the other hand, gets the pawn on B7 and the rook on the 7th rank. So rook takes D5 was played in the game, followed by C takes D5. Rook over to D1, rook C8, rook D3, rook C4, and in the game, rook to E3 was played.
Rook and Pawn Endgame, Part 2.
The idea now is to trade off the rook and start marching the king over towards the queen side. Okay, back to the game. In the game, rook E3 was played, and the game continued. King F8, King F2, King E7, King E2, pawn to G5, King D3, King D7, B3, rook C7, G3, King C6, C4, King C5, E takes D5, King takes D5. Okay, I'm done with my notes. I'm just going to play through the moves. You may practice these lines and these end games on your chessboard. For now, I am just going to play through the moves and give you the result. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for my next video.